Glad to see you, man.
I'm
Glad
glad
to
to see
see you.
you, homie. I'm glad to see we finally got this thing going.
Yeah.
For folks that don't know, what we really wanted to do was start like a informal lunch kind of chat. Not necessarily about cigars, doesn't have to be, but it's just like let's get to know Sebastian just a little bit. And it's so funny because we were trying to meet a little bit earlier, and I've got
Yeah.
my chicken parm here. This thing is ready to go.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
that looks good.
Yeah. So I've just been like staring at it, just waiting, but the wait is worth it.
Makes it even better.
That's
Oh yeah, yeah.
exactly right.
So where are
So
you at?
dude,
Is that
what
home?
oh yeah, this is home. This is Virginia right here.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, for some
Yeah.
reason, because of where the company is, my thought was, Cali or stuff, but I didn't realize or didn't think of didn't you say that you were potentially moving to Cali or something like this? Or is it just me
No, no, not me. Yeah, no, I mean I wish I would, but apparently if you weren't born in California, like you just can't move there. People leave California, they don't
yeah,
come
oh
to
yeah.
California.
The few years I lived in Dallas was like I think we lived there 5 years ish, something like this with Aileen. And the amount of people from California just moving to Texas is crazy. It's just
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. Yeah. Mm.
I
Looks
believe it, man.
beautiful where you at though.
It is, and you know what? Today it is 67 degrees at 12:30.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I mean,
That's not
can't beat
bad.
that. We had a couple of hot
Yeah.
days this summer, but no Texas or Honduran heat.
No, no, no.
Thank
Yeah,
God.
Texas heat in summer is rough. It's really, really rough. It's been hot here. It's supposed to be the rainy season. Gracias. Yeah. It's supposed to be rainy season. We had like a really strong storm yesterday night, but for the last few, probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there were barely any rain. So it was very strange, just hot, and that's pretty much it.
Dude. Oh,
Is that enough sandwich?
yeah. How many sandwiches is that? That's awesome.
It's three, but I like it. It's like makes me feel like a kid.
I
Have them split in two.
love
Mm.
that. You can take the Viking out of the North, but you can't take the North out of the Viking.
Mm. It's actually pretty cool. I mean that it's a coffee place in Denley here that is run by friends. They've had it for ooh, I don't even know how long they've had that. Probably close to in between 5 and 10 years somewhere, I would imagine.
Wow.
And they
That's
used to
awesome.
be just back there in the other place behind, and I would sit. So we actually, funny enough, when we created the factory, we spent nearly the 3 months we were here because we had no place for us to stay. We just were staying at the hotel. We had no offices, no nothing. So we
Hmm.
are staying back there, and there is a little walkway here and little businesses, and they would have tables outside. Which now that they moved in front, there's no space for them anymore. But I would be sitting back there with Aileen and just do the meetings out there, figure out like meet the people to that we're going to build the engineers and everything, and just smoke cigars and have coffee all day long. It was a cool time. It's good memories here. It's and the coffee.
Yeah.
If there is one thing I love coffee, right? And if there is one good coffee place here, there's a few decent one, but that's the best one from far. Do great coffee. Um, and just I just like the feel, right? It's easy.
Yeah.
Um,
It's home.
and yeah, so and
Yeah.
supporting your friends and everything is always important. So
And you've seen
yeah.
that from the ground 5 to 10 years. So you've seen it from the ground up, right?
Well, actually, the people that now own it are were half of the partners before. The guy that used to also be with them works with us now.
Oh,
So yeah, it's funny he left here, works with us. He actually travels in somewhere in your area most of the time.
oh,
He's in the
cool.
south. He takes care of part of the south. His name is Jack. Looks like a terrorist. long beard, he's half Honduran, half Palestinian. So let you imagine the mix a little bit. But he's a good guy, fun guy.
That's funny.
I just
Hi, Jack.
yeah, yeah. He's actually, I think he is currently traveling. I've not seen him in a week or two, so I think he has to be somewhere close to you. Mm. It's funny to do a sit down live or something like this.
Hmm.
No cigar, just food.
Yeah, I know. So
Changes a
I
bit.
actually I did bring a cigar, but I didn't want to disrespect the 2019 LE by eating with it. So
Mm,
I figured for this guy, I would wait a few minutes because I love that cigar.
I
It's
love
like
it.
a
Yeah, that has nice age to it.
yeah.
2019. It's funny. The 18 was, I think, my favorite still to this date.
Hmm.
I love the one from this year. Every year has something to it, right? But I think my three favorites have been 18 from far, and then last year's and this year's are definitely in that top three for me. The 19 was interesting. It was a milder cigar, but very flavorful,
Hmm.
kind of floral to it. It was a very interesting and it's the size that's that 4 3/4 by 58 is actually pretty sexy.
Dude, I almost didn't buy the cigar. I was so close because it's huge. But then I
Yeah.
smoked one and I was like, okay, screw it.
Mhm.
Like I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, I usually don't. I usually don't smoke that big of ring gauges. We do have one or two 60s and stuff like this, but
Mhm.
I mean, I will happen to smoke one from time to time, but it's not what I used to. It's not what I go to usually.
Right.
Um, but for some reason, I actually fell in love with that size. That 4 3/4 by 58 was actually the original size of the Cuban Coiba Supremos from 2014, if I remember correctly,
Oh wow.
which I just like the way it looked in that cheeky little box with
Yeah.
those thick little short cigars in there. It was nothing. I mean, when you looked at it, once you opened the box, it was nothing excessive. It's a 58, but it at first I had that impression it would feel like a 70 or something like this, but no, it just, and I don't know, there's just something about the visual of it that made me fall in love with it. And 18 was actually the same size, just box pressed, soft box pressed. And then we said, why not do it brown and see if it works with that other blind? And yeah, I was happy with it. It's a fun little cigar. I've not had
Oh
one
yeah.
though in a very long time. I think I have one, maybe two boxes in Switzerland left.
Ooh.
Actually, I'm flying. What is it? We're what, Tuesday? So I'm flying Thursday through the US quickly before going to Europe. So I might, because you showed me that, I might be looking for that box or see if I can
Yeah.
have if I do have a few of these left somewhere. I think I do. I
If
think
you
I do.
do, let me know if you get more chocolatey notes off of it. Because lately it has. Because I remember initially early on it was very delicate, very floral, but now it
Yep.
reminds me of like a brownie crisp. It's just very
Okay.
chocolatey, very still
Huh.
mellow and chill, but like
Yep.
I'm
It's
I'm liking it more now than I did before, and I loved it
than
before.
originally.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some cigars, just the way cigars evolve, right? Because that's a pretty major change from
Very.
floral, delicate to more chocolatey.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
intrigued. I have to say I probably haven't smoked one in at least probably 3 years. At least 3 years, I think. So it will be a great surprise. Yeah, I'll have to try it. I have to see. I just there is it's funny because you see some cigars, you think, I mean, it's hard sometimes to know how much potential it has to age, right?
Hmm.
And some things you happen to have really bad surprises. I mean, they fall off real fast, and some others
Yeah.
just get more delicate, more refined through time. And I mean, seeing such a big change in profile is something I wasn't expecting. So I shouldn't say that. It's my cigar, but
No, I mean it's constantly moving, right? I mean they're constantly
Mhm.
fermenting, and who Dude, the things that you guys do as blenders when you smoke something fresh and you say, "Oh yeah, this will evolve into that by the time it's ready for market." That's wizardry as far as I'm concerned.
Mm, yeah, but it's somewhat easy to know by habit, right? When when you know your tobaccos, that the ones you work with, because you never know everything, but when you know at least the ones you're working with and you have a good idea, when you smoke it fresh, where it's going to go when ready for the market. But there's a big difference between ready for the market to aged a few extra years after that, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where the let's say from the moment you smoke it fresh and you smoke it a bit, a few months later, etc., and usually a few months later it's ready for the market, right? Um, you have you already know, I said, that the way those tobacco are behaving and interacting between themselves, and you know it's the best way I can describe it is when you smoke the cigar fresh, you have a very clearly defined, like line by line, as if you were reading a book, or not even a book, better said, a recipe, right?
Mm.
Put 180 grams of this and that. You can really taste the different layers and the tobaccos you used, and you have somewhat of an interaction between them, but it's still very. It's not. It's they've really not gotten married yet. It's just really everyone living its own life. It's
Yeah,
like when a couple starts to get together, right? They both are still very much who they are,
right.
and then the more time they spend together, the more it gets into a more harmonious or not situation, right? And it's the same thing with tobacco. It can go one way or the other, but usually you have a good idea when it's fresh, and it gives you a very good idea of what it's going to be 3 or 4 months out or 6 months out. But again, I think it's much more difficult to know what it's going to be 5 years out, 10 years out,
Yeah.
even 2 years out sometimes. I mean, in that range of 2 years, you just see things usually, in my experience, mellow down a bit, get a bit more soft, a bit
Hmm.
more
The edges round out
married.
some.
Exactly. But the further you go, it's like in wine, you have that peak, right? The further you
Yeah.
go, you take a risk, but you get to new notes coming out, new things, um, nearly a new personality in some cases, and some just remain pretty stable. But usually you get a beautiful evolution, but then you have to be careful because there is that drop after it, right? Once you hit that point, and one thing that to me is difficult to know when that sweet spot is, if you don't have a lot of these cigars and continuously smoke one every few months at least, or a few every few months,
Hmm.
is that because in the new world realm, we use so many tobaccos from different areas, from different country, from different in within each country, so many different growing areas, and then the primings, and then the process, and then before that the seed that was used. Each and every tobacco is gonna have a separate potential of pushing through a certain amount of time, right? But you're only as good as your weakest tobacco, basically, right? So that's where it makes it difficult, because you can't just look at the cigar like a final piece and say, oh, this is going to be perfect in 20, it's going to be amazing in 20 years. You might have that one tobacco that just decayed, that just fell, and your cigar just lost the entire balance or something. So it's always been something fascinating, but
Hmm.
somewhat tricky, because I don't think there is
A lot
one. I
trickier.
don't. Yeah, I don't think there is one answer, and nobody. I don't think anybody, or probably barely anybody, has had so many tobaccos for so many decades that they can actually know and tested those kind of things to have a good idea where it's going to go. It's a little bit of hope in the you have hope in the future of the tobacco. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because think about it,
But
you'd have to be alive for 10 to 20 years experimenting with that tobacco, hoping, blue mold or something doesn't take it and wipe it out and all your research is worthless all of a sudden.
yeah,
Like,
or and you
that'd be
have
so hard.
in that one specific blend. That's the other thing. You have to have the tobacco in that one specific blend and smoke it through those decades and find the sweet spot. I mean, you can't. And then year over year, that crop is different. I mean, it's really nearly impossible. The only way as a consumer to really get that peak point is stock boxes from the same era and start opening one after the other and smoke them slowly, slowly, slowly until you find the sweet spot and start smoking everything you got. But then again, another tricky part is that you have tobacco from different areas in the same fields that have had different um, that have been exposed to different things in that same field during that season. You know, one place might have had more sun, the other one might have bit more humidity, soil is slightly different, et cetera, because
Yeah.
again, we work with something that is natural, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even that, and then your level and your plant, you might have chosen, you know, cortes 4 y 5, but then 4 and 5 from the same fields is already not the same cut, and then from not from the same area in the field, every leaf is so different. And I think and that brings me to something actually now that we discuss it, talk about this. I think we've been horrible in this industry trying to tell people that cigars should be exactly the same year over year, cigar over cigar, et cetera, et cetera. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah.
You try to get as close as you can. You have a range you try to stay in, but it's impossible. Tobacco is just a living thing. It's something that changes leaf by leaf. And so your balance always going to be slightly, slightly different. Again,
Mm-hmm.
our job is to make it, you know, as seamless and seem as um, constant as possible. But I think the wine industry made a much better job at this than we did. In the you know, you don't expect the 2017 taste like in 1956, right?
Right. And they
Cigars,
celebrate it, So some
yeah,
people are like, "Oh my gosh, you have to try the 2021 vintage." Even the newer stuff. They're like, "No, no, like this is better than all the previous, last 5 years or so." And
yep,
everybody goes out and hunts the current vintage as well.
yep.
They celebrate that.
They do. They said, and then there is differences, right, in between wine and cigars because most wines or most of men's high quality ones, what you'd compare to premium cigars, what we do, most of these people use their own area, their own grapes, they're from their own, um, little piece of Bordeaux or something like this, where we have the tendency to use tobaccos from so many different places. So even year over year, we have a more difficult it would be much more difficult to have that consistency year over year. And then the other thing is that we have those the way it's prepared, it's not like for us, you're not mashing all those leaves together and getting a juice out of it, right? You're using that one leaf and that one leaf might be different. Or in wine, you have that it creates, I think, more regularity by mixing all this together and getting that one wine from that one year and
Hmm.
then splitting it in casks and everything, where we rely on that one leaf. Us, sorry, scam call.
Oh no, there we go.
There.
Sorry, I was like, "Oh no, did I lose you?" I'm not going to say anything.
No. I got one of those beautiful scam calls, always the same. And the beauty of it is, for some reason, it seems to get priority over whatever you're doing always. So it cuts everything off.
Yes.
I
And the
don't know
weird
what it
thing
is.
is
It's
with like WhatsApp, especially if somebody else calls, it just kills the
oh
conversation.
yeah, it kills the conversation every time.
It's so
It
strange.
yeah, it is what it is, but it just drives me crazy. And people have well, the other thing is every time you start a conversation, you have a meeting, you do a live, you sit down with someone or something like this, that's when everybody starts calling, right? One call after the other.
Every
Always,
time.
always.
So do you think
But
it's
yeah,
like
it's
it's a
uh-huh.
company that's spamming people, or do you think like there's just a Ultron out there somewhere slowly driving us all crazy? Some great AI.
Some great AI. It's actually, I think those, I think, are or were um, call centers, right? From wherever the fuck they are or something like this. Some of it is automated, has always been. but I'm sure that more and more we're going to go towards just AI calls or stuff where you just end up with only robots. And
Yeah.
I never answer my phone. If I don't have your number, you're not supposed to call me. That's
Yep.
it. That's my theory about it. And
Hmm.
I think if you really have, if you, and I'm sure you'll agree, I think if you really need to reach me for a reason, you'll find a way. I mean, you'll know what we do. You go on the website, you go through the main the main email. It's gonna go dispatch to the office, and then I'll send it to me if it's really necessary.
Yeah.
So I
I
don't know
also just hate
why.
the phone call that just happens. I
Yeah.
don't know, am I the
Oh
only
yeah.
one? Like, I like
No.
it when people say, "Hey,
Yeah.
are you good to chat?" Right? Can I give
Yeah.
you a call? Is now a good time? Like just a little check-in, but the whole like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna call. Oh
Oh,
no.
I hate that. I hate that. We have, and we think about it. We have a few partners from across the world, right? Which means that you get weird ass calls that we does. Typically, I woke up this morning with text messages of questions at three. The first text message was at 3:01 a.m. I was like, "Are you shitting me?" I mean, I don't care. I want to answer at 3 in the morning. I'll read it as soon as I wake up. But you're like every morning, even though I get those messages. And I think it's the one thing I like, as you said, I do like the same thing as you do. Someone that stop checking. How hard is it to send a message saying, as you said, hey, is this a good time? Had a question.
Yep.
Sure, call.
Yeah.
You're doing you're it's there is nothing more annoying than you're doing something, you're in your flow in your day, you're getting shit done, and in the middle of the most, um complicated or the most tricky email to write, someone calls you and you're like, shit, lost the whole
The flow.
continuity, the flow, the energy, everything.
Yes.
I'm exactly like you. I don't like it.
No.
I like when things are planned. And actually, funny enough, when people call and I'm not, I usually just answer by the automatic answer. Can I call you
Yeah.
later?
Yeah.
And then I get my shit done, and then I call you back because
Smart.
I can't do that. I can't do that. No, I'm
No.
glad to hear I'm not the only one because it's horrible.
I feel
Horrible.
like I more lately I'm feeling more like the only one myself, but it just can't be.
Mm.
We can't be the only people annoyed by it. It's impossible.
No, in this world we live in, as fantastic as it is, that thing where you're 24/7, whatever you do, right?
Hmm.
You're just reachable always. I remember when those first conversations were starting to come up, the problems with those smartphones, with emails on it and everything. It's crazy how maybe 10 years later, things are just a reality now. It's just part of our life. It
Yeah.
10, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if it was Saturday, it was Saturday. If you weren't working a
Yeah.
specific job with a shift on that Saturday, you were not reachable, right?
Yep.
You might have that one or two people from the family that could reach you for an emergency. That was it.
Yep.
Now, if it's Sunday, you just get it, and people expect you to answer that same Sunday. That same in the next 30 minutes, they expect an answer or something like this.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how it's becoming hard. And I think it marks me more nowadays that we have a kid and those kind of things where before that I really didn't give a I'm sorry for the word, but didn't give two fucks about what day it was, what time it was.
Right.
But now with the baby, it's so little time that we spend together as a family and actually focus on ourselves and focus on the kid and try to give the kid attention,
Yeah.
that those little moments actually became important. I wouldn't have understood that a year ago, about 2 years ago or something. Um, but it really became a reality, and it's funny where now I value those moments. That I'll tell you something. When I first started, I hated Sundays and Saturdays
Really?
because yeah, because but first of all, this industry was my entire life. It still is most of my entire life, but there's a few things that changed. I said it with a kid and everything, but most of my entire life, it was just everything. And the one thing I had was I knew I could work, but I couldn't do anything in collaboration with people. So it would limit the amount of efforts or interactions you could have. So the only thing I was wishing for on a Sunday or on a Saturday was Monday. It's actually funny. I was like, oh, I can't wait for it to be Monday, be able to get this shit done, you know?
Right.
Where as I still love it as much as I did, but and I think there was a difference where when you start, and I'm sure that's also that probably speaks to everybody. When you start with something, whether it's a new job, whether it's your company, whatever it is, you have, or at least for me, I had to invent work for myself because there was nobody cared, right? Nobody gave a fuck. I'm sorry about the term, but nobody gave a fuck. And so you invent work. I remember sitting down at home with the paper and pen and inventing things they would have to do to be able to, take the next step and inventing stuff to do. Where nowadays I'm looking at my list and I'm like, shit, I haven't even done 3 of the things on the bullet point list and it just added 15 to it. And it's the complete opposite, right? You're trying to get less stuff on the list and you get more all the time. Where at that time, when you start, when you don't know, when it's new, right? You have to kind of, I really think you have to invent things to do so that you actually go ahead and get
Mhm.
somewhere, right? So those little
Totally.
things are.
You got to start that snowball. But now
Mm-hmm.
that it's rolling downhill, it's just gathering steam, and you're like, I'm
It's
sure, I'm guessing you're like, thank God for a Sunday, I can relax with the
yeah,
baby and just the family, and
100%. I enjoy those moments a lot more than I used to.
yeah.
No, that's that. Ooh, that looks nice
Speaking of
now.
the family, how is the family, man? How's everybody enjoying Honduras?
Well, I mean, everybody's happy. I think it's there's been a lot of changes. So when we learned for the baby, because for the little story, we had no idea, right? Our baby was always the business, and it took enough time, and we're like, we're good like this, and one day, Aileen just was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant." I was like, "Oh, okay. So what do we do now?" So we had to. It's funny how it shuffled the whole deck back. It's like, okay, now we have to repick cards and figure this shit out again. So when we learned, we were in Switzerland, but we were about to fly back to the U.S., to Dallas, where we used to live, and it took a while for us to digest and figure it out and everything. And the main thing was, what do we do? Because I didn't know the health system in the US. Well, I never experienced it, right? Because obviously I was born and raised in Switzerland. My wife Aileen is born and raised here in Danlí in Honduras. So none of us, and lucky enough that we never had a real issue in the US, so we never had to experience the health system. So on the good side, again, we didn't have to, but on the other side, we had to figure out, how do we do with a baby there? How does that work? All those kind
Yeah.
of things. And so we started looking at the options. Dallas was the initial option because that's where we lived. Honduras was another option than Lee, or Geneva in Switzerland because, again, obviously that's other places we knew well. Honduras's health system is not good. I mean, there's a few very good doctors, but it as beautiful as this country is, the infrastructure is not good, right? That's just the reality of
Hmm.
third world country, right? So we took that off the list. So the last thing remaining was Switzerland. So we decided to move to Switzerland. So we went back to the US, moved back to Switzerland, lived there for a year, had the baby there, and then because we're not US citizens, we had to get her part of the visa, etc. So we had to funny enough, we had just redone our application, and a few months later we had to start the application again to include the baby in there. So that was funny. We got the visa and then we decided to move back to Dallas. So we moved back early this year. I think it was early Jan or something like this, before mid-January. And one thing that happened was, we don't have family in the US, right? We have friends, but both of us work in the business. We've always worked in the business. That's been our life. And now suddenly we had a baby full time at home, plus the business to run. And it became really difficult. So we looked at the options again, and we decided to come here to Honduras to be closer first to the team, and to live here. And so to answer your question, we're really happy now here. We have, you know, we have a nice house where she can play. She has space to play. We have someone that takes care of her during the work hours that is at the house with us full time. Aileen's family, funny enough, we've seen Aileen's family nearly every day. They're here every day, looking nearly every day, going to see the baby and everything. So that helps too. And I always loved, I think, and Aileen as well as I think we have that appreciation for smaller like city structures where you can walk around where it's as much as I think skyrise and everything are beautiful to look at. I mean, we had that view on the skyline that was mind blowing in Dallas. The skyline in Dallas is
Yeah,
incredibly
that's
beautiful.
something else.
Night, it's ooh. But I was missing that little coffee, that little thing that it's everything is bigger, Texas. Um, and so I think we're really enjoying um even though the pace is we have a lot of work to catch up with and stuff like this. The pace is pretty crazy. But the outside of work life is a bit more cool, calm, cold, cool down and everything, and I think that's very enjoyable. So I think all of us are pretty happy.
That's good, man. Good
Long
balance.
long answer, but yeah.
Sometimes those are the best answers. Quick answers are usually dissatisfying.
Yes, no. Yeah.
I'm glad
Mm.
everybody's enjoying it though. That's awesome. Being with family is, I mean, that's hard to beat. Hard to beat.
Yeah, it's hard to beat. And you know, one thing I want to say is that I've I funny enough, I first got to Honduras 10 years ago. It's 10 years this year. And so Honduras really is another home for me, right? It's another place where I feel at home that I know. And one thing, people sometimes have a sad view of what Honduras might be, or, seen too much of what the press says and those kind of things. And if you would just see how beautiful that little town is right now. We're in the rainy season, so it rains a few hours or during the day or night and then stops and it's shiny. I mean, there is barely any clouds right now. Um, Everything is lush and green. There's mountains around. The little center of the town is colonial. It the experience of this is beautiful. I mean, that's what people should learn about Honduras and not the stupid news and shit that happens. And it's
Mm.
always easy if you want to scare people off. It's not very complicated. Obviously, I understand that murders and stuff like this sell a lot more than hey, look at my beautiful mountain. Even though Switzerland has been able to do the opposite, right? Look at my beautiful
Right.
mountain and cows and come and see me and make everything expensive. Um, but obviously for the press and everything, it's much easier to sell drama and fear and those kind of things, which is sad
Totally.
because I really hope that, especially for people like us in the industry, people that love cigars, um, I really hope that people will start to discover or rediscover Honduras, um, in this area specifically because it's glorious. It's beautiful.
Is it like well, can you actually fly into Danley?
That's the main problem.
Ah,
You
okay.
can't.
It seems like that
That's
a
it.
lot of places. You can't fly directly where you want to be.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
See, it's same thing with Esteli, right? You can't fly into
Mm-hmm.
Esteli. We're
Gotta go to
actually here
Managua.
mhm.
Yeah.
In Danley. Here we're about 30 minutes away from the border with Nicaragua, and a few hours away from Esteli. It's really not far. It's actually pretty closer. It's probably faster to go to Esteli than to go to the airport from here, um, which is pretty sad. Uh, the the airport used to be Tegucigalpa, which is the capital, but for some reason they decided. Well, it was the reputation of the airport was to be one of the most dangerous in the world because the runway was very short and it
Mm.
was in the middle of the city. So, and the city is surrounded by hills, small mountains. So the plane had to come in and do that U-turn just in front of the mountain and then land just close to the going just over houses before landing on that runway. However, only very good pilots were allowed to do so. So you had that thing going for you. You didn't have that, new pilot or something that you don't know if he
Right.
ever landed a plane that is actually flying for the first time.
Right.
No, you had people that were the creme de la creme, right? The best of the best that were landing there. Now they moved it further out to an airport called, it's in the city called Comayagua, which is actually a U.S. military base airport. And so it's a valley. It's easy to land. It's the problem is it's an extra hour away. So
Mm.
now you landed at XPL Comayagua, then you have an hour to Tegucigalpa, and they're redoing the roads from Tegucigalpa to here, Danley, which is depending on how you land. If the when they're working a road in the U.S., right? They'll have one side of the road blocked. They'll open the passage on one side to go through for 10 minutes, and the next side 10 minutes or whatever, 5 and 5 or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
Here, it's an hour and an hour. So if you come in at the wrong time, that trip can become very long, like very. And there
Wow.
there is, I think at most we've seen 8 of these on the way. Um, but I would say usually it takes us about between 3.5 and 4 hours to get to the airport, something like this. Which
Wow.
is, but then same thing, right? I was saying you, I'm going to Europe. There is Dortmund coming up, and we have a launch event for France in Paris and a few other things in Switzerland. I have to see. But Dortmund, biggest non-US, it's probably the biggest tobacco fair in the world. Definitely biggest non-US. I mean, it's massive. I think the PCA has one hall, right? It's, I think if I remember correctly, somewhere around 7 halls for Intertabac, but it brings everything tobacco or smoke related together, right? It's a bit different the concept. But it's a massive thing. People come from China, people come from all over the world. Some people come from the US, from everywhere. People come from Africa, everywhere. And there is no airport. The closest airport is Düsseldorf, about an hour or so away by cab. So that's another thing, right? You're flying in from, let's say, um, somewhere in China, and you can't even fly into the city. You have to, after your 32 different flights to get to Germany, then you have to find a cab or something like this to drive an extra hour to get into that small town, which is, and I'll say something. I love Germany. Germany is one of these countries I've always think it's beautiful. There is amazing things, right? Um, but Dortmund is the stereotypical, um, how do you say that? Industrial German city. It's
Mm.
gray. It's sad. I always say there's bridges, and I think they have, the trucks that go around that usually lift the trash and everything. I think those trucks go around and actually lift corpses under the bridges that hang themselves every night.
No
It is
way.
horrible. It is horrible. I
Just a
hate that
depressing
city.
town. It's like the one depressing town in Germany, huh?
In Germany. And then if you have, typically, what I do usually is I go to Geneva and then I drive up there. And from Geneva, because there's no airport in Dortmund, that's why I do it, right? It's roughly a 10-hour drive through. I mean, the autobahn is fun, but it's hours of just straight lines on slightly unrestricted highway, which I'm never looking forward to. Never. We've
No.
been doing this show for maybe 8 years now, something like this, except COVID times, which might have skipped 1 year or two. I don't even remember. But roughly 8 years. And I'm never looking forward to going there. It's always fun to be there and see everybody, et cetera, et cetera. But going there is not fun. Hmm. I mean,
Dude,
you guys never went. You never went to the trade show there, right?
no, no. Just flown through Germany a few times, but never stopped for the show. What's that one called again? Intertabac?
Into Tabac. Into
Yeah.
Tabac. Yep. It's basically roughly out of 7 holes. I think there's about two roughly there for cigars, premium cigars. The rest is other things. There's at the same time there's something that runs that's called intersupply that are, for example, machine made products, those kind of things,
Hmm.
including cigarettes, cigarillos, all those kind of things. So there's kind of two trade shows at the same time. Um, but the 2 holes are, and interestingly, it's a different landscape than in the US. You have some of the same brands. You obviously have most of the big guys, most of the same big corporations, but you also have a lot. There is a real microcosm of cigar brands and cigar world in Europe and the rest of the world that we don't even see in the US and vice versa, right? And that's why it's always interesting because it gets you to see. I mean, for people that go, it allows them to see stuff that um, are absolutely probably completely unknown on the US side, which is fun. And I
Yeah.
think it's also the reason why you see more and more in the last few years distributors and stuff like this from international coming to the US trade shows because there's so many brands that even are represented. Some of them are even represented in the rest of the world in certain countries, but don't show up at the trade show. Maybe because it's too much of a pain or whatever it is to get there,
Hmm.
whatever the reason is. But I think that's and I've seen we have a distributor, for example, our German distributors and a few other UK distributors, I think, Korean distributor, a few like this are going to both usually. And when they go to the US side, I was asking them, what are you doing here? Well, what they do is they come in and see how the dynamic is in terms of brands, what brand is coming up, what is making noise, what is interesting, what has not made noise yet, but looks interesting, looks that have a potential to be exposed also to the rest of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And they scan the professional side of the market this way to decide if something is interesting to bring in and actually present to their market. Which I like the concept. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's like headhunters, I guess, or scouts going out looking at,
Hmm.
yeah, different groups
Yeah,
playing.
pretty much,
Hmm.
pretty much. And there is movement in the rest of the world. There is a lot of things changing, and I think it really is important for any brand, any company, any business to be able to expand a bit out of um, the classic lines that we all work in, right? I remember when
Hmm.
I first started a business, I started on the European side, right? Obviously went back to Switzerland and started there. And everybody was telling me you should first build Switzerland and make Switzerland, big enough so that it sustains your business and then look at other markets. And I always said no. I think the key in the world we live in is it's like it's like 100 years ago trying to do business in one valley.
Right.
Why the hell would you not go to the big cities and the other places? I mean, try to expand so that you actually make a name for yourself. You actually start making relationships. You get
Hmm.
to meet people. I mean, if I stayed in Switzerland, I wouldn't know you. I mean, how does
Yeah.
that work? You wouldn't know me. I wouldn't know you. I mean, would be how do you build something like this? You
Yeah.
build it because you actually go out of that comfort zone and you go see people and some people start looking at what you're doing, you're looking at what they're doing, and it's a dance, right? It's a little bit of that, and then you build that relationship. And then I always thought, because the world is global,
Hmm.
that anything that has that wants or has the ambition of becoming global and established in general should more than global established should look at the world as one thing.
Hmm.
There are some exceptions, but typically, if the only voice that says Cavalier in the world is mine, I'm probably not going to survive very long, right? It's just not going to get. I mean,
Just go
I'll smoke my
shout it from the
cigars.
rooftop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if we are, if you're there saying Cavalier, if I'm here saying Cavalier, if someone in Korea is saying Cavalier, if someone in Germany is saying Cavalier at the same time, in Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then suddenly people start gaining trust in what you do and are more willing to say, you know what, I feel comfortable if I'm not the first, because then suddenly you're not the first ones to take a shot anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's something, okay, some other people took a shot. What's the worst that can happen? I don't like it. Okay. So you're much more likely to actually jump over that fence. And so I fought hard when I started because everybody was pushing back, say you should start on Bill Switzerland only, and then you'll see the rest. You'll do it later. It's like, okay, how many lives do I need to have to be able to do something like this? And I went full board opposite. And the result is we currently do 42 countries, and we're not even 10 years in. Um, and if we hadn't done this, I think we would have died a long time ago. And that's just, I mean, it's different when you start in the US, right? Because you have a bigger market, you have something that is somewhat self-sustainable. And you have already that many voices in the US that will shout shout with you.
Yeah.
But Switzerland, as much as I love my country and I love everybody we do business there with, et cetera, um, it's small. It's and one country on its own or by itself just wouldn't have been. I've seen people do it, but I don't think that. At least it wasn't. It wasn't my. It's not the view I have from the world or how it should be. I don't think that's how I want to build, at least. Mm.
How much of percentage, if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to detail
Uh-huh.
it too much, but percentage of American sales versus other countries nowadays for you guys?
So there is always two metrics, right? The first metric is cigar volume, cigar sales, units. And then the other metric is the monetary value, right? Dollar, Swiss franc, euro, whatever you want to take as a base value, right? Um, and I say there is two because the US currently is the last country and the only country we do distribution ourselves. So we
Mm,
sell to retailers. So we obviously sell as a distributor to a retailer. So the price point is higher, but it also means that we have our own sales force or share some my own and some my external, but there is more expenses like a distributor, right? Where the rest of the
hmm
world we sell to distributors or distributors buy from us because of the brand, something they want to work with, and then they have or they incur all those expenses and actually resell to the retailer, um, infrastructure, whatever it is. And so obviously the monetary value per cigar in the US is a bit higher than international because again, we are the distributor and we don't sell
hmm
to a distributor, right? Where in this case, the US numbers are fairly somewhat significantly higher. Now, if we look at the other value, which is the units,
Volume.
it's
Yeah.
close to 50-50,
Hmm.
currently close to 50-50, which is still crazy, right? Because you look at one country does 50% compared to 41 other countries, right? In those 41, you have a few that are symbolic, but
Right.
it's always nice to have a little flag there. And there's a few others that actually move decent volume, right?
hmm
Actually have abilities to, there's beautiful markets in Europe. Germany, of course. We just start with France, but France is a huge market once worked properly. Switzerland, small country, is a decent market. And then there are some surprises too. Like Korea has been a surprise for us. We've been working with
Yeah.
Korea for a good few years, and they've been doing very, very, very well from start. We're starting to work with a few more African countries, and I've had very good feedbacks on the person, people that work with him, that he does amazing business with them. And so there is surprises. On the other hand, there are other places again that are more difficult to conduct business in. Um, that will never do the same volumes for us, but we still are excited and happy to have them within the realm of what we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. More people shouting the name.
Yep. So roughly, to make it simple, roughly if we look unit by unit, close to 50-50. We do have I mean, and it's a situation that is comfortable too, because put all your eggs in the same basket, and then one thing falls, and what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Finished.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if one of part of one of the sides of something goes a bit down, you hope the other one goes up, and it balances everything out, right? That's a little bit
Totally.
base. It's basic business strategy just to ensure um, the serenity. You say that in English? Yeah, of your
Yeah.
operations,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The piece.
yeah. Sometimes I have French words that come to mind or Spanish words that come to mind. I just put them in English and I say it probably means something. We'll see how it is. Then people look at you sometimes like, what the fuck did that guy just say? It doesn't mean anything.
You
Mm,
just judge it off the reactions.
yeah, I do. I really
That's awesome.
sometimes I really have no clue if it's a real word or not. But I figure, or people just say, mm-hmm, sure. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Give them the
Or okay.
context clues. Yeah, just be
Yeah,
like, listen, have
just
have you had to change packaging for the different countries? Like, what if in one of these countries the diamond is like a symbol of like death? You know, have you had to give like a golden square, a golden oval, or something?
no, we've never had anything with the gold diamond. The gold diamond's been fine. But yeah, I mean, there's countries nowadays that have plain packaging, those kind of things where you have to go around and do things a bit differently. We've had one country, Romania, actually interesting. We had that conversation. A great guy, great distributor, beautiful country too. And the guy was like, "I want Cavalier, but only the gold diamond. I don't want any other bands." I was like, "But it allows you to, distinguish." It's like, "Yeah, it's rapper collar. It's good. People know the brand should be enough for people to know what it is and just trust it." I was like, "Okay."
Hmm.
So we've been doing this. So and it's been working. Um,
Wow,
it's
awesome.
interesting where that was the whole conversation, and he again a great guy. He was dead set on the fact that the only thing he wanted on the cigars was the gold diamond. That's it. We gave it a try. I don't know that I would do it everywhere because the amount of explanation you have to do after that. What's the difference between this one and this one? Okay, let's do this again. But that said on it, and it was a little bit how do you say that? Um, it's good for the ego. Not that I need it, but it's good for the ego because it makes someone tells you, look, the base, the one thing you've always said that you have to make a difference with that you needed to stand out is the one thing he wants and nothing else
Yeah,
in a country you had never set foot in.
yeah.
Um, pretty cool, pretty cool.
Validation.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. Now remember, you guys jumped on board with us in the US super early on. It was way before we were doing it ourselves. And it's funny when I think back how lucky we were to have people like you guys actually trust us and your consumers support it. Um, because honestly, why, right? Just another new cigar, something like this. I mean, it's crazy how early adopters like this make or break projects, companies, dreams,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and
But I think that was
it
that was mostly you though, man. I think that was mostly you because we brought it on and a lot of our cigar enthusiasts, they want to try the new things. They want to try the new people, right? It was as much as buying into Sebastian as it was the brand. But once they tried it, they were like, "Oh my God, this is great." And then they kept trying it. And that's
coming
that's the
back.
key distinction. Yeah, because we can
Yeah,
order anything once. And when it
yeah, or
goes, you're like, okay, we probably shouldn't reorder that.
yeah,
But
probably, yeah.
yeah, no, that was as much of you for the staying power as anything else.
But I mean, you know, maybe, but it goes back to I remember those early days, how horrible these days can be. People say business is rough. Oh boy,
Yep.
there's times it's very rewarding too, but there's times it's real rough. And
Hmm.
all those. you know, again, nobody needs a new cigar brand right nowadays. Nobody needs new anything. There's an oversaturation in the world of new things all the time. And I think it's due to people have more access to the information. There's more ways to share it with new people. I mean, that just creates a snowball effect of more and more and more.
Hmm.
Um, but the fact that, again, people like you supported, et cetera, your consumers supported, et cetera, is I always like to say, it's we're not here because we're the best of the best. We're not here because I make the best cigar in the world. I'm the best blender, blah blah blah. No, we do the best of what we can with our ability, with our knowledge, with our love for the product, with all those kind of things because we respect the consumer, and if we make a cigar, we make it first for us. And if we like it, we figure out some of the people must like it too. I mean, there is no way we're the only idiots that have that palate, right? Um, and so it's a little bit of selfish thing. We make it, we love it, we're like, okay, this is something, we can make something of it. But without those early supporters, I mean, and to help us grow through those hurdles and those pains, et cetera, there would not be what there is today for us, right? And it changed. I think the one thing that I want to say is how important that was, and that is still to this date, because we currently employ, we have on the payrolls slightly over 100 people, um, in-house, right? Between the factory, the warehouse, the US team, et cetera. Someone in Switzerland, just over 100, 110, something like this. It varies a little bit because factory, right? People come in and out. It's never 100% stable, but somewhere in that area where all these people have had, or we have been lucky to have the opportunity to offer jobs to try to make their days better, their families, to sustain them, not because of Cavalier, not because of who we are, not because of what we do, not because of how majestic and beautiful my beard is, but because of um, every single person that actually buys cigars and consumes them from us, from you, through us, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the thing. The key is there. Is that something that's, I think it's a lot of ego driven shit in this industry where we should sometimes open our eyes, and the reality we're here is not us, it's not our companies, not our brilliant ideas or whatever the fuck it is.
Hmm.
It's the trust of our retail partners, the trust of the press, trust of the consumer. And so the reason all those people have a job at Cavalier is you guys. It's you guys as consumers, and everybody else that supports, and that's priceless. And it might sound cheesy, but it's just a reality. It's priceless. That's what that makes the whole difference.
No, you're totally right. I mean, when you think about it, the cigar enthusiasts that trust us allow us to be able to do what we do and have these kinds of conversations right now. And that's on a very small scale versus the larger scale and everybody employed and all the families impacted. And yeah,
Hmm,
it's incredible to think about the ripple of everything.
crazy.
Yeah.
One hand, how much one hand, someone that hands you, someone that says, "Come with me, I'll help you." How that
Yeah.
what that does. And to put it in perspective, most of the people that work in factories and work in teams like this, they're one of the family at work. They usually have two, three people at charge minimum, right? So when we say we employ 100 something people, you really what you did consuming and choosing to consume a cigar from us and from other people too is in our case, yes, it generated 100 something jobs in the long run, but it also sustained life and food and a place to live, etc., for probably 300-400 people. And that's
Yeah.
when it starts looking crazy, right?
You're right. Right.
That one cigar you choose to smoke, the one cigar you chose to pick and have, that's what it does. That's what it does. And that's the beauty of, I think, what people understand in the US better than most other places is what small business does, right?
Hmm.
It's what us as consumers create or do have as an effect on small business and then on the entire economy. And I think we all can relate to this because or sometimes we're the consumer, but sometimes we're also one that have the benefits of it, right? The
True.
benefits from that situation. And so it's how important is this? I mean, this is everything. Yeah, big corporation, great too. They need to be here, and I'll never say the opposite. But I think with smaller businesses, like with family owned, I say smaller, but you know, there's a difference between you guys and a single mom and pop store, um, somewhere that has two people. But what does it change? The fact that go in there and supporting that place, you actually support someone that you can see, and you can see the impact on their life, right? Maybe the next week or next month you come back in, and part of your decision of going back there allowed them to have that extra person there,
Yeah,
create an
totally.
extra job.
Totally.
How important is that?
I think we are, it's funny because post COVID, we kind of hit like an era. You know, during COVID, everybody was they could appreciate jobs in a way that I don't think our generation could in a long time. Even '07 and '08, I don't think was as bad for job creation as that moment. But then after that, you have the rush. All of a sudden, things open back up. If people have a little bit of savings, they go spend it, and then you kind of stop thinking about the impact. But you're totally right, man. Everything you buy is voting with your wallet. You are sustaining people and brands with every single decision you make. It is important to be mindful. Absolutely. Dude, looking at
It is.
the gold, do you remember when we asked you to send us some blind review cigars without the gold? That was awesome.
We actually, it's funny because it's much easier nowadays to do it. But when we had a third party factory doing everything for us, it was really complicated because now we had to plan everything in advance. Now the small differences, right? We do now
Yeah.
have obviously our own factory, which means everyday production for Cavalier, right? We do some other projects for great people. Actually, some people that also come from your house.
Oh yeah.
Um, Jeremy, without to not to mention only one, right? But we do a few things for great people. We do what we do for friends, right? We don't run. We're happy to produce for other people, but we don't run and say, hey, I'm not shooting you a DM every 2 minutes to see if I can have production from you. It's if you want to have production with us, then come and see us. That's
Yeah.
always been the deal, and we want a relationship, and so that's what we've been doing. But every day we produce Cavalier. So now you want cigars without the gold diamond. We just look at what's been in the aging room, pick whatever out, pack it simple. When it's funny how more complicated, as much as I loved and appreciate every single bit of people having supported us and having done the third party thing with us, et cetera, et cetera. How much more complicated is this to pass something like this and make something like this happen?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's a phone call, and I get it. You'll have your cigars in 2 weeks, and it's all right. Maybe three because we need to do freezing, depending on the timing what day you call it. Bring it on Thursday, comes out on Tuesday. So if you call me on Friday, you just fuck yourself out of a week. But
Yeah.
that's it. Where
Yeah, I think last time it did take like 3 months, right? It was like 3.5 months.
I
It was
was
a big
long.
deal. But that was so
Uh,
cool because I'm sure that our blind review panel at the time thought there's no way they'd ever get a Cavalier cigar in the blind review pack. But
mm-hmm.
you made it happen. You made it happen. That was so awesome.
We can always do stuff like that. It's funny. I actually like how amazing is it to see there's some people that don't realize it, but they actually have really good palates, right? Not everybody. But some people have much better palates than they might think.
Hmm.
And so when you send them stuff like this and they send it like, is that a Cavalier? And I go, good, impressive. It's not all that simple, right? But
No,
when you start
no.
understanding at least signature, because everybody has a signature, right? I think
Hmm.
at least everybody that does it with heart, I think, has a signature. Where you like that cigar, and if you're somewhat familiar with it, whether it's one that you smoked already or not, you'll kind of see parallels between what you usually smoke and that other cigar. And that might be, XYZ's brand, just
Hmm.
because of how the cigar behaves. It doesn't have to be same strength or wrapper or anything, but there's something
Hmm.
most of the time. We work with a certain amount of tobaccos that we know well, and then we bring stuff in the mix from the outside that we're intrigued with or interested with, and see if it works, right? But you always have that heart. You always, most of
Yeah.
the time, you'll have that heart, right? Which
Yeah,
makes that
totally.
signature. And it's funny where people say Esteli, Hamastan, those kind of things. Sure, but we might, you take two or three brands that use Esteli and Hamastan as part of their heart, and none of them really taste the same. And that's something to understand, is that, again, different farmers, different growers, basically different processes, different curing, aging, uh, fermentation, and all those kind of things, and then different ratios and stuff like that, and all those kind of things will make it that much more unique with similar base tobaccos, right?
Totally. Dude, the world of tobacco is so crazy. It's so crazy. We recently were talking about somebody commented and said, what you're tasting is just tobacco. That's it. It's just tobacco. And so we expounded upon that, but I don't think even in that 2 minute video, we really covered all the different ways. It's mind blowing. And I don't think a lot of people understand the fermentation process and how even if you have the same exact leaf from the same exact soil, harvested on the same day, so same priming, you can ferment it so drastically different and you can get such different results. But even the primings themselves, I mean, you can smell two different primings from the same plant and they smell different. You know, the burn composition, it's just, it's wild. It's wild. And
It's
I hear some people say a lot of cigars taste the same. And I really feel like there are some that you're like, okay, this is a little more generic, maybe,
mhm,
probably the better word.
that's
It doesn't
probably a
have
good
a
way
lot
to
of
say it.
inspiration, but to say this tastes exactly like that, let's smoke them side by side. I think you're going to be surprised. I think you're going to be
Yeah,
shocked.
probably.
Yeah.
I think you'll have some parallels between certain cigars sometimes, and I don't think it's always something that the person that created them or the people that created them looked for. I think sometimes just accidents,
Hmm.
because of course you've not smoked. Even though we're all most of, I mean, if I look at myself, I'm somewhat of a cigar geek, right? I like to smoke a lot of different things.
Hmm.
I just love cigars, right? Um, and even like this, I'm far from having smoked, everything on the market. There's way
Right.
too many things, and there's things I don't want to smoke either. There's things that don't inspire me, and no disrespect meant or anything. They're just, we
Yeah.
all have some things that trigger us, right, in a good
Hmm.
or bad way. And
Hmm.
so the same way as some people will be triggered by the gold diamond and say, "Oh no, I never smoked that thing." Same way I'm triggered by certain things, certain visuals, and I'm like, nah, not for me.
Ooh,
Sorry.
what
And it might be
triggers you?
great. Hmm?
What triggers you?
It's hard to say, but the first thing is I'm a very like visual person. So I I really like when I see the attention to detail. It doesn't mean it has to be complicated or overly complex in terms of visuals. Typically, I love a simple old school tap band. I love it.
Mm.
Put it in that cab. I love it because
Hmm.
there is harmony in it. There is something that just looks right. And then other times
Yeah.
it want to look fancy, but there's too much shit over it. It's not balanced. It's just shouting at you. It's just, and I don't like. I won't pick that up. I can't. I just, and I sometimes I'll pick a cigar that is not that good, or not for my taste at least. Because I was more attracted to the visual than the to this one than the other, and might have been a much better choice to pick the other one. But I'm like that. For me, it's all starts with the eye, right? I need somewhat of a balance. I need typically someone that is much more worked on, much more complex visually. Black Label, right?
Mm.
Love what they
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
It's not that simplicity. It's on the contrary. It's a lot of artwork and details and stuff like this, but it's craftfully made. The artwork is clean. Everything it looks bright, right? When again, go back to other things where suddenly you have a massive band with 30 billion things on it, and then the box have 52 different colors and writings and sizes and shit. And you look at this and you're like, yeah, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'll never smoke that cigar. People will tell me it's amazing. I'll still not pick it up. I just cannot do it. I'd rather pick up a cigar that is just a cigar with no band, nothing, than pick that
Yeah.
up.
Mm,
It's for me, that's the major, that's the one, the one thing in a cigar that will make me, um if we go to watches, for example. I'm Swiss, so let's go to a cliche a little bit. um I'll never, same thing with cars and stuff. I like all those things, right? I think us men have a little bit of a love for, I'm sure a lot of ladies too, but I can speak for men in this case. I think a lot of us have a little bit of love for those kind of special grown-up toys. Um, and so I always pick a watch for its visual over its movement.
mm,
I'll pick a car for its line over its engine.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I want to say. I have that. That's what triggers me, right? I
I
have
see.
to love. I have to love the curves, the line, and everything before loving the product.
It's the
I
old
can't
adage,
just.
you eat with your eyes first
Yep.
kind of deal.
I. I'm not. And I'm sure there's people. There are a lot of people are completely opposite. They'll go and read the details and be like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever because that engine or that blend or that movement in that watch or that thing is so much
Hmm.
more, so much better than XYZ's competitor." I don't care. I don't care. I want to see it's the full package experience for me. I need to fall in love first. Um, what was created, the intent behind it, how it was executed, and sometimes simple creates a better result. I think something that
Yeah.
just um, translate to something a bit more pure.
Mm.
Um, don't get me wrong. If the thing under it is bad, I won't buy it again. But there's much bigger chance that I'll give it a try than the one where the 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 inspiration didn't come through, right? Where it
Hmm.
feels overdone, fake, um, and then people I think trigger. I mean, people is something else that I think trigger me, right? In a way or another, depending. I really like what you do, who you are, what you stand for, or can't deal with it. And I won't shout it on roofs. I'm not vocal about it. I'm not
Yeah.
nothing. I'll be vocal about it if I support you.
Mm.
I'll be vocal
That's a
about it if
neat
I
kind of
support you.
triggering. I've never heard it described that way, but that makes sense. You can be triggered for good or for ill.
Yeah,
That's
you can.
interesting.
Interesting. What triggers you?
Hmm.
What would trigger you in some on as a consumer?
Whew. As a consumer, tunneling. Tunneling absolutely triggers me. As a consumer, there
Mm-hmm.
is one factory which I will not name that I've written off years ago. I have no intent to try it again anytime soon. I just had so many tunneling issues, and I said, okay, that's enough. Enough is enough, right? I can forgive a plug cigar from time to time. I can forgive a lot of things, but tunneling is like one of those things that's bad, but not bad enough. It's not so bad that you're like, I have to set the cigar down. I can't smoke it. It's
Yeah,
just
you
bad
want to
enough
fight
that you
with it,
keep
right?
fighting it, and then by the end, you're just mad. You're mad at the world, you know?
Yeah, and it's funny. There's a few things that trigger tunneling, right? But I mean, it can be roll. It can be the rolling of it, right? Bad placement of tobacco, but
Hmm.
it can also just be certain tobaccos themselves. In theory, and that triggers people. Funny enough, um, tobacco cigars have stems. They have veins. They have stems. You kind of work typically, as most of you will know, there is in your filler, you'll take off probably somewhere half up to three quarters of the leaf, sometimes a little less than half, depending on what tobaccos you use, etc., and what you're trying to achieve with that tobacco, because you'll have much more intensity. It's a less clean flavor around
Hmm.
any part of tobacco around the stem or the stem itself, because if you want the juice comes through there, right? The nutrients and everything. That's how the plant feeds, the leaves feed, right, and grow. And so you have a much higher concentration of um, of natural chemicals, et cetera, from the juice, if you want, of the plant. Um, and so you'll have the further out you go on the leaf, the cleaner the profile through fermentation, the closer to the central leaf, the more charged with anything you're trying to get rid of is still there, right? And so you'll have all, but it also implies that you have a higher level of strength in that stem. You just still have more nutrients and more life to it. It's just something that will, if you take it up, it's funny enough, you roll a cigar completely no stems whatsoever. You roll that same cigar with a bit of the stems, the usual. The difference in intensity is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe a less clean, and maybe you lose a little bit of that clean or cleaner profile, but you gain in life if you want. You gain a few years. You know, when you go opposite, less stems, the older the person, the more stems, the younger the person, the more energy, the more it jumps around. Anyways,
More
I like
vibrant,
visual interpretation. Yeah, more.
I like that.
And there is a few tobaccos that have big central stems, central veins. Stems is the wrong, but central veins. Stems is the wrong term. And you'll have higher the priming, obviously, more sun, more time on the plant. It's going to get thicker, a thicker tobacco structure, but also means anything that the leaves, if the leaf gets thicker or bigger, the vein structure of the leaf, obviously to support it, gets bigger and thicker, right? And so you have certain tobaccos like broadleaf, like some Paraguay, some San Andres, a few different things that have inherently, because of the size of their leaves, the length of their leaves, have inherently a bigger vein structure. And that also means that when you have that vein that for some reason in the center, because it's a thicker tobacco, starts burning, running down, you start getting tunneling issues. If it's a small vein, you'll see little dots and it doesn't do much. If it's one of those bigger tobaccos, thicker, bigger leaf, you have the risk of it actually starting an actual tunneling situation. We've seen it. It's something that you fight against, but it's something that sadly happens from time to time, depending on what tobaccos you actually pick. But then again, you take that same cigar. We've had the case with Paraguay. We took that same cigar, took the veins completely out, the central vein completely out, and the cigar was just plain, boring. It was just flat. It was, I mean, the whole intensity, the whole thing that took you, you know, the whole thing that took you on a journey nearly done. Beautiful, clean profile, but nothing. I mean, no life to it, nothing. And so sometimes, I know in our case, sometimes you say, well, we'll take a risk, we'll figure it out, we'll work on it. But it's always, you sweat a bit because you know that those kind of leaves, those kind of tobaccos will add a level of risk to your blend in terms of, and it's not even a question of placement of tobacco anymore. It's just a question of the tobacco itself. Comes sometimes just from, you know, when you you place your tobacco in your hand, you nick the bottom, the top, whatever, depending on how you do it, place it aside. But when you nick it, sometimes you take, because the vein is a bit harder than the leaf itself, is a bit harder to break, sometimes you have more of the vein left. Tobacco that leaves, now you have tobacco, you have a vein in your hand that you might, if your roller doesn't pay attention, for example, have it in your hand, the tobacco is here. Now when he places back the tobacco, you have that space around the vein that is basically tobacco less. It's a little less, I mean, it's around, but it's not attached to anymore. And that will create typically that kind of problem. Will start running through down. The vein's going to burn, but tobacco is not going to dare to create some kind of resistance, if you want. And then you have that issue. That's one of the things that are probably less known, that are less seen, but typically that's something you'll see. And it's something you will see, and a few people have talked about it. They'll see, especially with higher priming tobaccos or inherently bigger leaves. Again, like San Andres broadleaf, Paraguay, and a few different things. But then again, most commonly it's poor placement of tobacco.
What do you think about fermentation? I've also heard that it could be improperly fermented tobacco. that I guess essentially gets dried out, and so the oils leave, and so now it's just not going to combust the same way the other leaves around it are. Is that also
So,
true?
I mean, if you think about it, if you want to put it into extreme, now you put a tobacco that is under fermented, that had not gone through its entire fermentation cycle. I don't know, my English is getting broken right now. Means it's tobacco that has more nutrients. It didn't burn through everything. It's gonna burn poorly. It's gonna burn slowly. It's gonna taste funky too, but for the burn itself, right? Now you put on top of that tobacco that is perfectly aged, fermented, et cetera, et cetera. Fermentation is done proper. Let's say you've had year and a half, 2 years, slow process, well done, beautiful tobacco, beautiful clean taste, beautiful burn. It still has life in it, but it's gone through what it had to go through. And then you add a third tobacco, which is tobacco pasado. It's tobacco that is or too old, that lost all life. I mean, think about it. It's like a leaf, right? It's a leaf. At the end of the day, that leaf, when it falls from let's forget about tobacco. You have a leaf that falls from a tree, right?
Mhm.
It's going to go through a process, and getting at the end of the fall, it's just going to turn into dirt, right? It's going to
Yeah.
deintegrate. It's going to be dead. If you put it between book leaves, you just have that dry leaf that's dead. If you take
Yeah.
it, just crumbles, it's dead. Well, that tobacco, or a tobacco that has been pushed too far in fermentation, pasado, first of all, tastes like nothing. Use less tobacco. Nobody will ever want that, but sometimes it ends up in a cigar or something like this, and that tobacco also will create less resistance to burn, right? It's going to burn faster. So in
Mm.
theory, I've not experienced it myself, but in theory, if you deduct it, yes. If you have, and worst, if you go from one end to the other, from a tobacco that is old, too old, or has been pasado, that went through a fermentation process that was too extreme or too long or too fast. It could be just too fast, too much heat, too much humidity that pushes that graph just up. It will burn through everything. It will basically disrupt the cell structure and everything, right? You'll have a dead tobacco done. And so that's going to burn obviously much faster than a tobacco that is vigorous, that it's gone through its process, but it's still in its prime. And that tobacco is also going to burn faster. The middle one is going to burn faster than tobacco that has not been processed properly. Which means that if you want the worst result, I think you add the three together, and and then you want to have fun. You put the pasado, taco pasado in the center, the good one, and the second, like as a second, how you say that, second layer, and then your base, you use the tobacco that is not ready yet. It's
Yeah.
gonna burn like a reverse, typical
Just
reverse
ruin your
announcing,
day.
right?
Ruin
Yeah,
your day.
pretty much. I would. I mean, again, it's not something I'm just deducting right there. It's not something I've
Yeah. Just a
experienced, but
possibility.
the reality is, look at the how the tobaccos behave. It's more than probable that it would happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, which brings me to my second point. For the good triggering, educators. That I love it when people take a moment to educate, fill in the blanks. There's so much mystique and cloak and dagger in this industry. And yeah, anytime somebody takes a moment to like pause and educate folks, I'm so excited. So excited.
It's it's interesting because I think this industry has a lot of people that have their own perspective, point of view. There's some like global truth, and then there's some things that are just experience and just personal perception of things. But there is, I think, a general field where people are willing to share. I mean, that's what I experienced when I first came here, right? People that were from the industry that were willing to share their knowledge for no
Hmm.
reason other than me being interested about it.
Hmm.
Um, and what is unique in this industry is most industries have schools, if you want. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but
Yeah.
have places where you can learn about things. The only place you can learn about tobacco is where tobacco is. That's it.
Yeah.
There is no other way. I mean, we can talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. My experience might be something. Some people might laugh at it. Some other people might be like, no, I like what he's saying. Doesn't matter. That's my experience. That's my way of approaching. I think when you look at the uniqueness of it is that it's, again, there is no degree for it.
Hmm.
Yeah, there is agriculture, those kind of things for growing. But even that, there is no, if you look at one of the most famous agricultural schools for engineering in Latin America, it's here in Honduras, in El Zamorano, which is between here and Tegucigalpa. Anybody that is someone in agriculture or most tobacco side too have gone through this school, but they don't grow tobacco. There's no, and we were talking about it with Brian. They're like, there is no tobacco. They have a massive part of a valley where they grow stuff. They teach people about it, et cetera, et cetera. No tobacco. We're in
Huh.
one of the biggest tobacco growing countries in the world. Where, I mean, the economy of part of Central America, of part of the Caribbean, is tobacco, and there is, and people that go there are from the industry. A lot of people that go there are from the industry. Nothing about tobacco. So even the agricultural aspect of it, even though there is a school that does agricultural engineering, et cetera, don't have any specific program for tobacco. At least from what we've looked at, research, et cetera, et cetera. We had a few conversations with people from that came from that education background. And then when it comes down to actual, there is some kind of mystique when it comes down to actual tobacco, cigars, the rolling, the factory side of things, the fermentation, all those things. There is nothing. It's word to mouth. It's being there, making it, doing
Yeah.
it with the family or the father or the grandfather, or being an employee of and having them teach you and show you how to do it. Learn tobacco, live tobacco, and that's how you learn.
The School of
It's the
Hard
only
Knocks.
way. It's madness, right? When you think about it, it's madness. There is nobody has a. We live in a world where everything is, you have to come out of a university, have degrees and all this and that, which I'm really not a fan of. Literally don't have degrees or anything, but I don't think it's the one way to do it. But we're so used to that system, and when you jump into the cigar world, you're like, okay, where are the rules? What's the rules? Tell me more about
Yeah.
it.
Where's my
Where's the
guidebook?
book? Where's the
Yeah.
book? Where's the bullet point list? Where's all that? Or is it not?
Yeah.
Good luck. It's like this tobacco grows there, dries there, fermentation we do there, aging is there, and then gets rolled and goes to market. You're like, okay, details, please. And then you go to one person to another. Again, there is some general rules that people use, but not everybody does the drying process different. They look at their ecosystem differently. They look at different things, similar and different things when they look for land for growing. There are different rules or approaches to fermentation. There's different rules or approaches to aging. It's so complex.
Hmm.
It it it's mind blowing that there is no book for rules or rule of books or
Yeah.
whatever the term is in English.
Yeah. And
It's crazy.
everybody's still creating their own new techniques. I remember Domain Cigars, and they were doing the Hispanic process, which sounded really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, everybody's still, which is a great thing, right? Everybody's evolving, everybody is modernizing to the best of their ability. They are preserving tradition and history, but they're also like putting their new spin on it, which it's exciting, but you're right, it's also frustrating at the same time.
Well, the difficulty is sometimes, as much as I love doing the things that I was taught and I've seen, and with the people that we're around, because I'll be honest, yes, I've been in the industry for a few years. Yes, I worked at factories, etc., before even starting in the industry. But the reality is we have a fantastic team around us that has way more knowledge than I do on the technical side and those kind of things. People that are highly knowledgeable, that were, for some of them, born and raised in it, right? And that really makes everything possible. But sometimes you really, I mean, at least there is always that research of, is there a better way to do what we're doing? Is there a newer way, a different way, or is it if we did it with someone else's knowledge, would we get to a different result? And there's always that somewhat lack of answer, right? Because you already know that you could turn to 20 different people. Everybody thinks they have the one right way of doing it. Most cases. Some people will happily share. Some people will even show you, teach you. But is that the right way, or should it be the next guy's right way that brings you to the final result you would like to get to? I mean,
Right.
again, there is no answer to this. The only answer is trying, and you need a few lives to be able to go through everybody's knowledge to actually figure out what would work the best for you with your approach. That's, I don't know if it makes sense. I think it sounds
Yeah.
even more confusing than before touching that subject, but it's a really unique subject for that
Yeah.
that matter, right?
Well, I think the hardest thing is to understand what you don't know, to know what you don't know. And by breaking it down and saying you would need multiple lifetimes, I mean, I think it's so indicative of where you are now that you understand a lot of the things you don't know yet. And that's a
There's a lot.
huge first step. Huge first step.
There's a lot. No, and again, we love the journey from having a bit of 10 years or 12 years ago, a bit of book knowledge of tobacco, right? Having read and stuff like this, to the first steps actually doing things 10 years ago, learning here in Honduras and Ica and DR, et cetera, to time period where I only focused on retail and distribution, brand building, where I kind of lost touch with that part. The one part I really loved, actually, kind of lost touch with it. To being forced to get back in touch with it when we decided to open the factory, because no choice, right? Now it's on your shoulders, and you better figure this shit out. And then, which was amazing, because it really forced me to refresh everything that just became a side thing from the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then through the processes, starting to do our own fermentation for, we process, for example, San Andres, we do process some Esteli, we process some Paraguay, we process Jalapa, we've processed some Central American broadleaf, Jamaican broadleaf, maybe.
All
Processing
the
some.
things.
Uh-huh. And then there's a lot of things that we don't, right? Like Hamastan, most of the case we don't process it, et cetera, et cetera. But having to go through all those tobaccos and adapt the process, the fermentation process, to each and every one of them. And
Right.
then re-understanding the differences of why you use that much water or less water, et cetera, et cetera. How do you process your wrapper compared to your fillers? Esteli, it's funny, we've done some testing where we processed Esteli filler for the last 2 years or so, a bit more than 2 years now, the same way as you would process regular Habano wrapper, like we process a Jalapa, those kind of things, which is Esteli tends to be processed very fast, usually, most of the time filler, trying to get, and it you end up with burnt tobacco, right? It's just what it is. So processing that Esteli filler the same way as if it was a wrapper, meaning barely adding any water. It's been yes, somewhere around 2 years, just over 2 years in Pilon. We've been trying the tobacco, using it a little bit here, a little bit there, just to see the differences, understand. Now, suddenly you have the same base profile of Esteli, which to me is, I mean, we use a lot of it, but it's not your steak on your plate. Some tobacco that I find particularly interesting by itself, but it works very well, harmonize things, and actually bring the balance to the other tobaccos or ingredient that you use. And so the major difference is that you still had the same base profile, but then suddenly in the one that we processed over the last 2 and something years, you have layers, and clean, very clear layers in that profile, which I don't even know if I like that much, but it just, I mean, it's interesting. It's just
Yeah,
interesting to do those kind of things, right? But then again, you're
science.
experimenting, you're doing things, and again, from those first days where it was, book understanding to actually practicing to losing track of it to actually with the factory now for the last few years being much more in touch with it again and really diving deep into those kind of things. And hopefully later on, I mean, one thing that I've been dreaming of is growing some tobacco. We'll see how that goes. We'll see where it leads us. It's a tough challenge. So maybe, I don't
Yeah,
know. It's probably not for today, but it's definitely something that I'd like to experience at some point. But it's a
another
different ball
lifetime.
game again. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a different ball game again. It's not.
yeah,
It's if you have a factory, you know more or less how to make cigars. I say more or less because you never know everything, right? You somewhat have an idea of what you're doing. It's just the reality of the world. I mean, if you think you know shit, you probably lie to yourself, right? There is whatever you experience and that's pretty much it, but you'll never have the final answer or the one and only truth about things,
right.
in my opinion, my 2 cents, right? But knowing how to run a factory, have a factory, make cigars, etc., definitely does not guarantee you have any clue of how to fucking grow tobacco, right? I don't. If there is one thing in this industry that I wish I knew about, and I really don't think I know barely anything about, sadly, is growing tobacco. But it's there. There's a worm there, and we'll probably jump into the pool at some point.
Oh yeah.
Um, but how fascinating, right? That
Mhm.
that that part,
Yeah,
that seeds to barn, just that part is I can't wait to experience that part. I've seen it, I've gone through it, I've walked through it, but I literally have, I would say, no knowledge, right? I know the times, I know those kind of things, but it would be another suicide mission that we would go on. It's classical, right? It's business. Do some suicide missions. If you survive, you're good. Do the next one. That's
that's
pretty much
it.
what it is.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's really what it is. Sink or swim.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's life in general, right? Let's be
yeah.
honest.
There's
Sink
no
or swim.
do-overs, right?
Nope. Nope. I mean, not in the same, not in the same fashion, at least. So we'll see. But that's little things like these that I think will be interesting to see in the future, and I'm
Yeah,
fascinated by the people that are doing it and how they know it, how it how it just you know is in their veins, something that just
yeah.
it's their life. It's
Their DNA.
fascinating. It's beautiful.
Third, fourth, fifth generation. Yeah, so you're right. I mean,
Yeah,
it would take a lifetime plus to
yeah.
learn all
Well,
that.
that's the thing. You can't take a chance on your own. You really have to find the right people. I mean, I guess you can. I would not do it, but I guess you can. I think
Hmm.
the best way is to find someone you feel have the same or similar vision of the things, and then you bring something to the table, they bring something to the table. If you don't have that knowledge, find someone that has it, that has been in this industry, that has been in the growing part of the business, wherever it was, that you can trust and that you can learn again together. Because typically, if you have someone, let's say someone that used to do it in Cuba, techniques there are different. The access
Hmm.
to machinery, all those things is just not the same, right? Fertilizers are not the same. The land is not the same. The climate is not the same. The way the tobacco has evolved, I mean, the seeds we use here are not the same anymore,
Hmm.
and all those kind of things. So if it's first for them, they'll bring somewhat of knowledge, but there's going to be trial and errors, right?
Yep.
So find that one person or a few people that you can get with together and take those chances. I would never have opened the factory on my own. We did it with other few people, and it just worked that way, right? Find the right people you can vibrate with, right? You
You
feel
got
you can
to.
build something with.
Got to. Got to. Speaking of, I don't want to take up too much more of your time today,
Yeah, of
but
course.
could we circle back around maybe in a couple of weeks? And I would love to do just another chat with you specifically about launching the factory. and
Yeah.
everything that comes with that. I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, it'd be amazing to start my own factory. I just think that'd be so exciting to basically just ruin their dreams just a little bit. I'm
Yeah,
kidding. I'm kidding,
I'm all in
just
for it. No,
yeah,
I hope it does ruin their dreams, and at the same time give them even more will to actually do it. Right?
yeah,
There is good
yeah.
and bad to everything. So I'd love to do it. I mean, 100%.
Cool.
And what I could, I'll see if I can bring some lunch or something at the factory. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll
Probably
light up.
just when I'm back from Europe would be a great day.
That'd be awesome, man. And
Perfect.
dude, real quick, last or first thing you're going to do in Switzerland. Very first thing you're looking forward to doing.
I already know what it is. It's already planned. We're eating a fondue with my brother and my mother, going back to her home and a fondue, so classical Swiss fondue, which is a moitié-moitié.
Ooh.
There's too many things about fondue. French people say they make fondue, they don't. There is that fondue chain in the US. It's not fondue. I mean, I'm sorry, it just is what it is. There's one fondue and one and only. It comes from the Gruyere area in Switzerland, the same name. The castle around the area around the castle that gave the name to the cheese called Gruyere, right?
Oh
Which
yeah.
is a Swiss cheese that has no holes, by the way. Uh, so that's what we're gonna do.
Makes a hell of a
It's
grilled cheese sandwich, by the way.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna sit down, sadly without Amy and the baby, but with my brother and my mother, and we're gonna celebrate and eat that at night. First thing I'm gonna do there. So
Yes. It's
yeah,
exciting,
looking
man.
forward to it.
Sebastian, thank you so much, my man. You're an educator, a gentleman, just such a great guy. I really appreciate everything you do for not only us, but the industry as a whole. And smoking your stuff, being in your presence, always, always a good time.
No,
Oh,
I appreciate you, Dave.
smoke gold,
Oh,
stay gold.
stay gold.
Ah,
Love it. No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you letting me know about that concept that you were having. I really like it. It was a fun little breakfast lunch, and
yeah,
I'm looking forward to do this again whenever you want.
perfect.
Thank you,
Thank you, brother.
everybody. Thank you, Dave. Um, we appreciate all of you and everything you do. It means a lot.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you all for watching.